Good morning. So my name is Cindy Xu. I'm going to kick this off. I'm going to introduce our speakers. So I am assistant professor at the University of Michigan. With me today are my amazing colleagues, Drs. Amy Zeidan, University of Kentucky. We have Jen Love, who's actually with her new baby in Philly. Right now she'll be live tweeting. And then we have Dr. Utsha Khatri, who's one of our chief residents at Penn, and then Angela Mills, of course, our chair at Columbia. So what we're going to talk about today is actually, can you hear me okay? Yeah. 6 effective strategies of SHEmergency for recruitment and retention for female EM residents. So SHEmergency is a resident-driven initiative started at Penn, and it's a women professional development group. And what we're going to highlight today is really 3 main sections. One is to first identify the gender disparities that exist that are commonly faced by female EM residents. We're actually going to dive into 6 main disparity areas that are commonly faced by EM residents who are women, but I would argue probably for all specialties. And then we're going to propose some effective strategies to overcome these challenges, and particularly implementation strategies and how to achieve sustainability of SHEmergency. You may all be aware of this leaky pipeline phenomenon. So this is data from AAMC in 2018, where for the first time really we've had now more than 50% of medical students and matriculants to U.S. medical schools. However, the percentage of female residents, and particularly then as you subsequently move up the ranks to the more senior positions, full professors and deans, have remained essentially less than 20%. If we focus just on the emergency medicine residents, what we see is essentially the same phenomenon. So we have, over the last decade or so, an increase of percentage of applicants, male applicants and EM residents over the last decade, up to 65%. You can see in the blue lines up at the top the last couple years. Whereas if you look at the female percentage, it actually plateaued, if not actually decreased, down to around 35% in the last couple years in emergency medicine. So why may that be? We've identified 6 areas of disparities that are encountered commonly by women residents in emergency medicine. And they are in advancement and promotion, in speakership, in award recognition, compensation, evaluation, and wellness. And we're going to dive into each of these topics in the subsequent slides. So how did I personally get involved in this amazing endeavor and actually met these amazing ladies is during my chief year at Penn. And we started really as wanting to organize several out-of-work events to really promote collegiality and sisterhood and also mentorship between the women residents and faculty at Penn. And so this is one of such events, the paint night, that got started. And I would say that from that point on, we really, I think, the sense of, collegiality. Subsequently, we were able to recruit amazing women residents such as Jen, Amy, and Utsha. And this actually led to this collaboration, I would say, lifelong friendship. There are actually probably 2 main structures of women professional development groups. More commonly, and this is a strategy implemented at SHEmergency at Penn and also at my new job family at Michigan, which is the bottom-up approach, right? And so this is usually started by a group of proactive residents or faculty mentors, whereby they organize different types of events outside of work a lot of times, or we're actually doing work to promote leadership and mentorship. This had actually transformed into the top-down approach, where then the program leadership, for example, or the department leadership then sponsor or encourage different things like conferences or annual meetings. So this is, the left here is a gender bias in emergency medicine annual conference that was hosted by my colleagues at Detroit Receiving, and where they invited Dara and Esther as keynote speakers. And this is actually started as resident-driven initiative and then progressed to residency program leadership sponsor events. Other types of PDGs are actually institutional and if not multi-institutional. So at Penn, there's the focus on health and leadership for women, which is started by Dr. Stephanie Buell. At Michigan, we have our annual Leadership Summit for Women, which is actually open to anybody across the country, where we bring together different amazing speakers in healthcare and different types of healthcare to learn about how to really promote yourself and lead. My colleagues in the Department of Surgery at Michigan spearheaded a Michigan Women's Collaborative, Surgical Collaborative, really with the same goal in mind, which is actually to really bring the women surgeons together and help them really move up the ranks. So we're actually going to now move on and dive into the 6 areas of the disparities. We're going to start with advancement and promotion, but Angela's going to lead us up that. I just wanted to point out, so disparities actually do exist everywhere. So to make this slide, I used the Noun Project. However, they had a very sort of male-centric figures, and so if you can see, there's actually like women head on top of men heads with these figures. All right, Angela.
So when we started this professional development group, we really wanted to do this in a thoughtful way. So we did a very robust literature review, and we tried to figure out where are the areas of disparities that women face. And obviously, you saw the leaky pipeline that Dr. Hsu pointed out. And so, we have this great now majority of medical students who are women, yet when you look as they go through, especially through residency, through faculty and senior faculty, there's this huge, leaky pipeline, and we lose a lot of people. So I wanted to give you a little bit of the background. We looked a lot into advancement and promotion for women, and this is national data. This is actually brand new. It just came from the December 2018 snapshot from the AAMC, looking at overall ranks of women faculty. And as you can see, even at the instructor level, emergency medicine's already a little bit lower. And you can see as we move up ranks, we're significantly lower than the national standard. So 25% overall full professors in the United States at U.S. medical students are women, versus in emergency medicine, it's only 18%. So we already know that emergency medicine does have a challenge. And so we're trying to think about, why is that? Why do women faculty, why do we have lower numbers? We actually just recently published a study that came out in academic emergency medicine this year, specifically looking at academic emergency medicine faculty and looking at gender differences in rank. And we found, looking at national data, that women are far less likely to be associate professors and full professors. And this is after we controlled for pretty much every factor we could think of that would affect your promotion. So we included age, years since residency, we looked at NIH grant funding, publications, even clinical time by Medicare reimbursements. We took all those pieces, controlled, and still found a significant difference in the numbers of women who were at higher levels, either associate or full professor. And then also just thinking about leadership, I love a study, it's called the Moustache Index. And so this group looked at women leaders across the country. It wasn't just emergency medicine, it was all specialties. And they chose mustaches because in the US, it's relatively rare that men have mustaches, about 15%. And so they went online and they basically took the top 50 NIH-funded U.S. medical schools and looked at how many senior leaders in departments, so they included things like chairs, vice chairs, and division chiefs, et cetera, were people with mustaches versus how many were women. The red arrow there is emergency medicine, and only 13% were women versus 19% were mustaches. And this is kind of a tongue-in-cheek, but I think it just goes to show that, again, it's another place of that leaky pipeline where we lose women at the higher ranks. And we know that to do that, to get people there, you have to start early, medical student residency, et cetera. And then another factor in getting promoted, we all know that folks reach these levels and be able to become professors by authorship. So if you look here, this is over 4 decades. They actually chose sort of top 6 journals, including the New England Journal, JAMA, and looked at first authors, which is the yellow line, and these lines represent percentage of women over time. And you can see first authors has certainly improved, but it's still well under 30%. Senior authors is in the green, and then overlaid on this, you can see the red are the numbers of medical students who are women, and the blue are the number of professors. So we know we have challenges in all of these things. And then the last one I'll point out are grants. This is a brand new study that just came out a couple months ago and looked at dollars for PIs of NIH-funded grants that came out, just looking at men versus women, and found a $40,000 difference that women received, $40,000 less for PI studies. And again, they controlled for various types of studies, R type, et cetera. So again, as we were thinking about our professional development group and how we can support our women residents, how do we go about doing that? So one of our very first events that we held was a speed dating event. We called it SHEmergency Mentorship. We know the data actually shows that women seek mentorship more often than men, and certainly, especially in medicine, when you have areas that women can have mentors and role models, et cetera, it allows for more success and more productivity. So we did this event. We actually held it in the summer. I think we were outdoors at a beer garden, and we had faculty sitting on one side of the table. We had the residents sit on the other side of the table. We set a timer. We had some set suggested questions, and each pair, so you paired up one faculty with one resident, had 10 minutes together. And then we would, timer would go off and we would all, the residents would switch down a seat. And, I think this was a great, number one, for the interns, it was nice because you got to meet the interns and actually spent 10 minutes just talking and learning about one another. But for the second, third years, from this meeting, people started developing research projects. Maybe they wanted to do a QI initiative and saying, hey, I can help you with that, or I know another faculty member who could help you. So really starting that ability to try to affect authorship, even grants, applying for some of these smaller SAEM grants, et cetera. And then for the fourth years, there was a lot of career counseling, career development. So this was a really nice way to get to know the residents very well and provide a mentorship that many of these short 10-minute conversations led to a year long of mentoring and lots of projects. We know that as well, speakership is also an area of disparities. And in fact, I don't have the study here, but there was a study specifically looking at emergency medicine national conferences and showed that it was less than a third of the speakers were women, and it was about a quarter of the speakership time was dedicated to women. So we know that there's a challenge there. And again, things like this, speakership, grants, authorship, all lead to development, becoming an assistant, associate, full professor, and the advancement and promotion of women. So as part of our professional development group, we brought on a professional speaking coach, and they did a program for the residents and really went over from a professional coach type of way of how to effectively speak, how to put together a good presentation. The residents were really able to learn skills and also practice, and it was really a big success. And then I'll turn it over to my colleague for awards.
Okay, so the next area we wanted to address was a disparity that we recognized in the literature. There are a few studies that show that female physicians are less likely to be recognized by awards in comparison to their male colleagues. So this first study was done by Julie Silver, looking specifically at PM&R national recognition over a 10-year period, and showed that less than 30 awards were received by female physicians compared to 71 of male physicians. And then this second study here was done by Stephanie Buell at our institution, demonstrating a very similar finding with a specific focus on the fact that females were more likely to receive educational awards rather than research awards, etc. So our strategy was we formed a sort of writing group with our leadership in our professional development group, and we wrote a ton of nominations, and we were actually very successful in getting awards for many of our female residents. So what we did was we would find awards. We used a list we got from Feminem and from looking online, and pair each resident or faculty member with that award. And we were all actually successful in receiving awards and also getting many of our colleagues nominated and awarded. And I just want to highlight that Cindy got the AWEM Early Career Award, which was something that came out of this group. Yes. Oh, sorry. Is that better? Did you hear? Do you want me to repeat it? Okay. All right. The next area where we have well-documented disparities is in compensation. So this was a study in 2016 using survey data of 24 different medical schools, over 10,000 physicians, demonstrating that if you women make $20,000 less than their male colleagues if you I'm missing a word here. If you adjust, thank you, for everything else. So NIH funding, authorship, et cetera, et cetera. So if all things are equal, we still make $20,000 less than our male colleagues. Similarly, a recent study in academic emergency medicine demonstrated in emergency medicine over a 4-year period that while all salaries did go up, female physicians still make $12,000 less than their male colleagues. So how we decided to sort of address that is we recognize that salary in residency is relatively unchanged, so there's not a whole lot we can do in terms of addressing it during residency. However, we thought it would be a great idea to have a discussion on contract negotiation. So we had a wine and cheese night. It was called our Galentine's night at Angela's house, and had a panel of really great faculty discuss how to get the most out of contract negotiation, not just in terms of salary, but in terms of other things that you can ask for. Additionally, we partnered with the women's MBA group at Wharton School of Business and had a panel called Leadership in Crisis, where the goal was sort of to form collegiality with our business colleagues and understand the barriers we all face in our professional lives. In terms of evaluations, there's a group that did a 2-part study that was very profound, showing that first, when evaluating milestone achievement in residents, specifically emergency medicine residents, men and women started about the same, but over 3 years, men received milestones or attained milestones at a faster rate than their female colleagues, meaning that as female residents would have to spend an additional 3 to 4 months in residency to attain milestone achievement that their male colleagues achieved. And again, the same group did the second part of this, which showed differences in qualitative feedback when looking at evaluations, specifically showing that female residents oftentimes received inconsistent feedback in their evaluations. So to address this, we had a journal club in which we talked about this article and invited our male colleagues, and with the goal of coming up with solutions for how we could change this in our residency program. The second part of that was featuring an article called Witchy with a B, which looked specifically at code leadership and evaluated residents for what traits they thought were ideal code leadership. And most of the traits that came out of that were tended to be more male-specific traits. And so we had a discussion at one of our attendees' house about how we as females can be successful code leaders while still maintaining our own individuality and personality.
Whether you're in residency now or you did it many years ago, you probably remember it as a period where your wellness is always threatened. And unfortunately, that's more true for female residents than male residents. This was a very interesting study, actually, that came out of the surgical literature. This was published in the Annals of Surgery, where they looked at, it was a mixed method study, so they looked at quantitative survey questions about wellness and being burnt out among 7,000 surgical residents, but also had a component where they did qualitative studies on 90 individuals, male and female, residents and attendings. And what they found, unfortunately, was that female residents were much more likely to report feeling burnt out, violating their duty, hour regulations, feeling worthless and depressed. And in the qualitative part of this study, one really interesting theme that came out was that the lack of female mentorship was often cited by males and females as one of the causes of feeling burnt out during residency. So we have done a lot of events that have focused on wellness. Actually, one of the first events that we started doing my intern year was a hip-hop dance class that Angela used to go to on her own, and she invited us. And like the walk over to the dance class, the water breaks during the dance class, the walk back was just like filled with like mentoring pearls. And Amy and I were like, we have to do this all the time. And so that's really where the momentum came from during my time at Penn. But we've gone to dance classes, yoga classes. The photos on the right are us volunteering to make dinner together at Prevention Point, which is a shelter that provides services to people with opioid use disorder. And we try to make these events in the evenings and make them as family friendly as possible as well. One of our really exciting expansions this past year was we went from just our local group at Penn to a citywide expansion. This came from Amy and Jen, who went to the FIX conference, met a bunch of amazing female leaders in the Philly area and had talked to them about our group and how we would love to collaborate. So we organized an event with 6 of the emergency medicine residency programs in Philadelphia. We had 50 slots just from space limitations, and they were sold out within less than 2 weeks. And we had a really interesting panel discussion. The name of the panel was Physician Women in Leadership, Play the Game or Change the Rules. And the panelists were program leadership, medical directors, chairs, vice chairs, division chiefs, and they all shared their experience on, whether they conformed to the male model of leadership or where they totally kind of broke the mold and played by their own roles. And it was a really, really interesting discussion. So we're really excited about everything that we've accomplished over the years, but we know that we still have a long ways to go. When we think about our group, we recognize that we are extremely fortunate and unique in how many female powerhouses we have as faculty at our institution, even though some of them left. But we understand that not everyone has that. And so we think that there are other ways to achieve the same level of mentorship, even if your numbers are lower. So, for example, we started to partner with other professional development groups. Amy mentioned the business school. The PhD program has one. Other medicine specialties have one. And when you reach out to them, everyone is talking about the same things and very eager to collaborate. We've also thrown out the idea of doing e-events. So you could do a journal club and have like a Google Hangout, even though, physically you might not have a lot of people in your area. You can connect at any time with things like Google. In terms of sustainability, the 2 main things we are focusing on are making sure that year after year there are residents driving the curriculum. All of our events are based on resident need. Residents say, like, I want to work on this. How can I do this? And think of an event with a lot of attending mentorship and sponsorship. And so we've always had a senior resident, either a 3rd or 4th year, kind of be in charge of organizing a lot of the events with the help of a 2nd year. And each year we kind of groom people based on who comes out to the events, express interest, and kind of mentor them along the way. And we really want this to succeed and excel without having it to be attending run, because I think the beauty of it really is that it comes from the residents. And then the part that we're really excited about and would really love to hear your thoughts on are how to make our efforts measurable in terms of outcomes. And so we've talked about how can we've done all of these events, how can we say that it's led to retention, recruitment, promotion, advancement of women in our field. And we've started thinking about surveys, qualitative, longitudinal studies with participants who have participated and then moved on to be an attending elsewhere. keeping really close track of the awards and the speakership opportunities that come from our group, but we'd love to hear more ideas. And if you're interested in kind of adopting this, thinking about taking it back to your institution, we actually have a paper coming out in Academic Medicine where we describe what we did. This is a 12-month curriculum with the different topics and the events and suggestions on how you can accomplish them at your institution. So now we'd like to get on to, actually before we move on, does anyone have any questions?
Can you use a mic, Kinjal, since they're recording it?
Do you guys want to come up?
No, we may not have a mic.
So the question was, who's paying for these events? And that's a really great question. And actually part of our challenges for, when we think about expanding. So far, everything has been, I'll give you some examples. So the speakership workshop, when we brought in the professional speaking coach, she did that pro bono because she believed in the mission of the group. She was way beyond anything we could afford. The yoga, one of the yoga classes as well, like we told the studio what our mission was, and they also gave us free classes. So there are a lot of things that we've been able to accomplish without having to pay for them, but some of the other events, they're all, so far, have been attending sponsored. So whatever group of attendings shows up, or even when they can't come physically, they will offer to help with the finances. None of the events have been super expensive, so that's been helpful, and we've been budget conscious. But things that we're thinking about in the future, we made some t-shirts, some SHEmergency t-shirts, and we sold those, have a little bit of a starting budget from that. And our next step is actually to reach out, since we have now 4 years of alumni plus, to reach out to alumni and secure donations that way.
We're hoping that this can be a budget that is within our department or within the institution. That I think would be a long-term goal, and to do that, I think we have to, which is our next part, is show data and show metrics on success. And so the next thing that we're working on is developing metrics for success, to really show that to our institution, our department, and say, this has been successful in XYZ way, and this is why you should fund us.
Anyone have any other questions? So the next part of this, we actually wanted to do a little speed dating with all of you. So if we could rearrange ourselves so we're all in like one part of the room, we're going to take the same model that we do for our SHEmergency group, where we're going to have you guys talk to each other. We have some prompts and some questions, and then we'll switch every 5 minutes.